Hey, everybody, welcome once again to the East West Connection Wrestling Podcast. I am Sig. Over here, I think, is KG wearing his Mil Muertes shirt. I'm sporting some Brian Cage action here, the Machine.
Sheen.
So
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think that alone, our T-shirts set up what today's episode is going to be all about. It's going to be Lucha Underground. This was 2014. This show aired on the Rey Network. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, KG, how you doing this week, my man?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really excited to talk about the Lucha Underground. I know you are, and I just can't
Absolutely.
wait till we get freaking kicked off here. I'm super pumped.
For sure. We went back and forth all week on what specifically this show was going to be about, but we realized we can talk about this show ad nauseum until the end of time. Essentially, that's how good this stuff was. So today is going to be a little introduction to season one and some of the characters and the overall gist of what Lucha Underground was all about. Way different than the WWE and the AEW production that you see on TV today, and even different completely from WCW and ECW in the past. They all follow a real life format. This was its own universe. We're gonna get into that though. Yeah, a lot to get to, so we're gonna try to condense it down as an introductory episode. But yeah, Lucha Underground. It was probably next to ECW one of my favorite TV wrestling shows of all time. Some great stuff, some great characters, and some great debuting talent came out of this TV show, as we're going to get into in maybe not the concurring weeks ahead, but in the weeks ahead, we're going to get into some more Lucha Underground stuff. Depending on the fan feedback, but we already had some requests to get into some Lucha. So I think without further ado, I think let's get into it. What do you got, KG? Let's start me off. What do you got?
Yeah, let's. We're gonna give some background here, of course, on one of our favorite shows, like you mentioned. We'll elaborate a little bit more at the end as well. But of course, this actually took place in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. You're very familiar with that area. Inside the temple, as they called it. So the temple was kind of like, if anyone ever saw the movie Bloodsport, I think it was, with Jean-Claude Van Damme. So it was kind of like all these different fighters that are going to meet inside this temple that had some kind of Aztecian sci-fi background. So this show, if you watch it,
Yeah.
it has like a kind of cool sci-fi feel. I know neither one of us are huge sci-fi kind of guys. I mean, we like our whatever Star Wars, that kind of stuff. But we're not too big into it. But for whatever reason, this show, they did it right. They did it the right way. They also had the Believers, which you may relate to in WWE terms as the Universe. So it's a little similarity there. Not many similarities we'll find on the way. But basically, the guy who started this whole thing, Sig, was Dario Cueto, the wealthy promoter. So what could you tell us about Dario Cueto?
Right. Dario was a guy. Now, the actual guy, he had no wrestling background. He's just an actor, believe it or not, from probably the LA area, I assume. But he played this Dario Cueto role to a T. Whatever they told him to find to become this character, he found it. He was Vince McMahon times 20 to me. He was the perfect heel owner slash promoter. And like you said, he made the temple his own fighter blood pit. It was just a great atmosphere. And like you said, also the believers were his believers. They were invited to the temple to see his Aztecian warriors do battle. But like you said, there was a sci-fi outer realm vibe to it that it almost they set the tone with their own universe. And I hate to use that term because it's the WWE coined term for the fans and whatnot. So that's
Sure.
but honestly, it's a great way to look at it because within this Lucha Underground universe, some things were a little weird. Like the characters were out there, but because of the way they set this up, it, it's hard to even really start talking about it. But it was a TV show about wrestling. It wasn't a wrestling show. It wasn't a wrestling TV show, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So within their universe, it all made sense of why this guy came from the cosmos and he was actually from outer space, and why this guy was an undead warrior living his thousandth life. It's just a lot. It made sense when you believed, hence the believers, in these characters and in this temple, in this Aztecian, you know, um, format. So yeah, but Dario Cueto, he was essentially a heel, but he wasn't really a heel because he was on the fan side when it came to wanting the violence
Sure.
and inciting the fights, because that was another thing I loved. They weren't wrestlers, they weren't superstars, they were fighters. They were there to fight. They were there to win the prize. They were there for a reason. In today's modern wrestling, we don't really know why guys fight. There, a couple guys have an issue. They want to win belts, I guess, or championships, But these guys were fighters. There was money involved. There were high stakes. Eventually, there were titles. There wasn't even titles for a few weeks. The first few weeks, it
Hmm.
was just to see what was going to happen, to see who was going to come out
Sure.
on top. So just a very interesting style, a very interesting way to start your promotion off, or to start your TV show off. Either way. So
Right.
Dario Cueto, great character at the Temple. They set the stage very well to start you off.
Definitely, and part of setting the stage is having a good announce team. And the announce team here consisted of Matt Stryker, former of WWE wrestler, former indie wrestler who we followed back in the day, former high school history teacher or whatever he was. Super personable guy. We had the pleasure of meeting him, talking to him a few times. He's an East Coast guy like us. And Vampiro, the legendary Vampiro from his days in WCW, and prior to that, I guess FMW or Japan. Of course, Mexican luchador.
Yeah,
Wrestled all over the globe, basically, all over the place. So it was an interesting combo, and it's funny because we had talked about. And I don't know why we keep talking about him, to be honest, but Mongo McMichael, we saw that he wasn't getting better. I remember when we watched Vampiro, the first few episodes, we're like, I don't know, maybe, but he definitely hit his stride, and he did an excellent job. Matt Stryker did a great job of talking about the history. So when you went from one episode to the next, you knew the last week's history. You got a little recap from them. He talked during the match and gave a great backstory and talked about, as you mentioned, the the believers, and talked about the sci-fi background of the guy of 1,000 deaths and the phoenix who rose from the Aztec warriors, Puma, and all this stuff. So like he talked about all that kind of stuff
yeah.
to give a nice background. What else could you say about the commentary team here of Matt Stryker and Vampiro?
Right. Well, I think you summed it up perfectly. But Stryker, to a T, was just perfect in this role, and very underrated as a commentator in general. In WWE, I thought his stuff was super underrated, but here he shined. He was able to really shine. He set the tone perfectly. He knew the characters. He knew their ins and outs. And a lot of times with current product, it's also cookie cutter. But to Matt Stryker, or listening to Matt Stryker, you really got the sense for each character, what their goals were, what their meanings were, what their characters were, without calling it a character. He was able to convey that meaning of why Mil Muertes was doing what he was doing, why Prince Puma, uh, for the thousands of years before of his tribe, just things like that, really set the tone. And Stryker was just super underrated in this role. Probably one of my favorite commentators, at least in the Lucha Underground universe. But Stryker in Lucha was just a top announcer. And Vampiro, like you said, he hit his stride, and he was a great color man. He might not have been a hold for hold play-by-play guy, but having the experience of being a around the world legend, and especially with Lucha, knowing that Lucha background and that Lucha style, um, Vampiro was able to add in why this was important, why this was a big move, why just the little whys and whats and wheres, to accentuate Matt, and together they ended up being a perfect team, just a perfect duo for what Lucha Underground needed to be.
Absolutely. And as we keep talking about these different characters, why don't we get into that portion of the show here? We're bringing up Prince Puma and Mortes, and a kind of a bigger name. And season one is loaded with them. Is Johnny Mundo? We might know him as John Morrison now. Johnny Nitro. Johnny. What else was he called? Johnny Impact. So he's been
Yeah.
man of many names. Tremendous talent. I felt like even when I was watching the show at this point, and I know it was kind of a recurring, uh, issue with Lucha Underground, was able to keep talent. Was you just felt like Johnny Mundo, being the big star that he was, and the looks and everything he could do, that it was just a matter of time that he went back to WWE. Unfortunately, in some ways, but yeah, Johnny Mundo. So what could you say about Johnny Mundo? I mean, the guy's held belts all over the world. We talked about him last week on our IC title as a notable mention.
Yeah. Yeah, Johnny was he was probably like the big star of the show, one of the guys they really were counting on to bring in the
Sure.
casual fan or the WWE fan. because without some of those WWE names, or like they ended up bringing in Alberto Del Rio, Alberto El Patron, they ended up calling him later on in the season, and then eventually in season 2 we'd see Rey Mysterio come in, which was a huge coup for them. But they kind of needed a few names to become a little more mainstream, get a few more clicks and likes, and that kind of thing. Otherwise, it was going to be just another indie promotion with TV time. But being able to score Johnny Mundo, here he is, Johnny Mundo, was just a phenomenal coup, because Johnny, not just was he a name with name value, he was a hell of a talent, and he fit that lucha style. He's more of like his style, I would call it like that parkour meets wrestling meets pro wrestling style, which is very unique. Not many people have been able to pull it off the way he does. But that parkour style meeting that lucha style, that high flying style of a Prince Puma, Ricochet, who we're going to get into shortly as well. And season 1 was very much based around their friendship slash feud slash friendship, which was a great story to tell throughout the season. But he meshed so well with these guys. They're all about the same height, same build. So while they may not have had a 6'6", 300-pound monster, they didn't need it
Which
when the match quality. Well, yeah. No, they definitely had their share of monsters, especially towards the end, or moving forward in the seasons. But the point really is just that the match quality, almost show to show, you'd find at least 1 or 2, probably 3 matches that just were off the chart stuff. And Johnny was a big part of that. So for sure, we were lucky that Johnny was in between his WWE runs for this Lucha Underground season, and the seasons that he was here with us. He actually ended up running through all the entire show's run, which unfortunately it's never been officially canceled, but season 4 was pretty much the wrap up. But we'll get into that when we do our season 5 fantasy booking.
Sure.
That's coming up.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Right.
So we talked about Johnny. You're talking about Johnny Mundo, the first kind of official real feud, and Johnny was featured more as a babyface earlier in the season. Johnny and Prince Puma. So Prince Puma, those of you who are WWE fans, which at least somewhat half of our audience, I would say at least, are familiar with, Ricochet. Phenomenal talent. For me, this was like, I think I had heard the name in the Indies. I might have seen some, a few matches that he had done some crazy stuff like over in Europe and a couple other places. But when I really started sitting down and watching Lucha Underground, and I watched Prince Puma, I was like, wow. I mean, the guy is athletically gifted as anyone who has ever stepped foot in a wrestling ring, and it was just a pure joy to watch.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal once in a lifetime talent. Too athletic maybe for his own good. A lot of people criticize him that he's too spotty. That's something we could get into at another point, because I think currently AEW is very spotty when it comes to the way they put their matches together. But
Sure.
that's another argument for another episode, like you said. But no, a hell of a talent, beyond athletic. Just the things he can do in the ring, they come naturally to him that most people would have to practice for years for. But his style fit with Johnny and with the rest of that cast so well that he was pushed in a top position, and very rightfully so. So Ricochet, Prince Puma, whatever you want to call him, a hell of an athlete, and you keep using this word, but a hell of a coup for the Lucha Underground roster. Great guy to
definitely
base that stuff around, base the top program on.
And at that point, he was somebody, and this is something else that we could talk about in a future date too. Is it somebody that, okay, they had these established guys, like we mentioned Johnny Mundo, you mentioned Alberto Del Rio, Alberto El Patron, but they built new talent, and the new talent, their first ever champion, was somebody who was probably never seen by the mainstream or the believers, to the audience. So Prince Puma, I love that they did that. I love that they were a new promotion, and hey, we have this new guy. Here's our face. You've never seen this before. Because, yeah, we've seen Chris Jericho before. We've seen Jon Moxley before. We've seen them hold the titles before. Not doing anything for me. I'm sorry. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing AEW, but other promotions have done the same thing, Impact or whatever. This is somebody completely new that they decided, hey, we have something special here. We have something different, and we're going to build our company or our future, if they're, however far they were looking ahead, around this guy right here. Another guy that was maybe more of the veteran type, that had wrestled all over the world, El Masias. What else was he in TNA? He had a short run as well, from Puerto Rico, actually. Man of 1,000 deaths, Mil Mortes, and his seductive and beautiful Katrina at ringside
Yeah.
that had the stone.
She
Um, yeah, what could you say about this dynamic
well,
duo?
well, first of all, she's my wife. She just doesn't know it yet, but absolutely stunningly beautiful. So there was eye candy in Lucha Underground too, and she tipped the cake, man. She took the cake. But so together they were a hell of a duo. They had their own little backstory of why they were even together. I think it was something along the lines of like a childhood girlfriend or something like that, and she ended up being his mistress throughout the seasons. Um, but just a fun pairing. He ended up, as you see on KG's shirt, he was one of the masked luchadors. He had wrestled previously as Judas Macias and Ricky Macias without the mask. He's a longer haired fella, but just a hell of a he was a tank. Might not be the tallest dude, but he looked super intimidating, and especially with some of these smaller guys in the ring, made him look even more larger than life. So Mil Muertes, hell of a heel, hell of a character. Um, and, a lot of times you get guys like that in that role, and they're just doing an Undertaker impression. But he made it his own. It wasn't just like a dead man walking kind of gimmick.
Yeah.
He brought it to life. Which, pardon the pun, he brought the death gimmick to life. But he did. Hell of a heel. He was actually one of the only ones who was a solidified heel. A lot of the characters you kind of towed that line of
Flip-flopped a little.
tweener role.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of they towed the line of the tweener, and it was up to the believers to decide who they were going to cheer in a lot of the matches. But Mill was that solidified heel. He ended up with the Disciples of Death, where his masked cronies towards the end of the season. So they had
Mhm.
the whole stable of death essentially, and led by Katrina, the lovely Katrina. I'll see you later, honey. But yeah, just it's great stuff, and really everything we're going to talk about, I'm going to end with, oh, great stuff, good stuff. So there
I
really wasn't
can hear you.
any black eye to Lucha Underground, but Mill was one of the top characters. He ended up finishing off the season with the belt, so he was a heavily pushed character as well. But Mil Muertes, number one heel in the company at that point, and rightfully so.
And quite surprised he hasn't landed himself a job somewhere with AEW or even Impact. Or I know he's been around a while. He's not a spring chicken anymore, but he still can do some things in the ring. And what an imposing and an awesome look to him. And somebody that he was featured throughout the whole show as having a feud with. You guys may know him as Rey Fenix in AEW, and of course they had their big casket match at the end of season one. I'm not sure if that was Aztec Warfare or Ultima Lucha, but they had an awesome match. They had an awesome feud. Rey Fenix, or Phoenix, we've seen him wrestle also in person. What are your thoughts on Rey Fenix?
Phoenix, I think, is phenomenal. Real life brother of Pentagon JR, who we're gonna also get into later on here. Um, that was actually never brought up in the Lucha universe of how
No.
Phoenix and Pentagon were brothers, which to me is a testament to both men, because they're such strong characters on their own that you don't need to have the Lucha brothers together to be an act. Where of course we'd seen
Yes.
them on the Indies, and you bring them both in, and they're a tag team and tag team specialists and this and that. And then, of course, AEW has used them essentially only as a tag team, and essentially only on Dark. I really don't remember the last big feud they've had. But enough about that. We sound like we're dogging AEW, which we probably will at some point in the future. But in Lucha Underground, Rey Phoenix in Lucha Underground, he didn't go by the Ray at that point, but a
Mhm.
hell of a talent, and just absolutely underrated. Some of the things he could do in the ring, just like Puma, were out of this world. His balance, his technique, his footwork, just completely out of this world stuff, and very new to wrestling audiences. A lot of guys, myself included, hadn't seen workers like this before or since. Phoenix is easily in one of my top five guys is currently working right now. I think he
Absolutely.
is. I think he's overshadowed by Pentagon in most cases. I've said since I started watching them that I think Phoenix is actually a better worker altogether. Maybe not as strong of a character as Pentagon, but if as far as in ring goes, I think Phoenix is one of the top dudes in Lucha Underground, and probably anywhere
Certainly.
in the world.
And splitting hairs between those two guys, you can't really go wrong with either one that you choose. I know I'm a little more of a Pentagon guy. You're a little more
Right.
of a Phoenix, but I mean, to not be a
Yeah,
fan
and
of either one is definitely
that's
not
not to
going to
take
happen.
anything away from Pentagon, right? Not to take anything
Yeah,
away from Pentagon at all.
right.
Just that just shows how big a Phoenix guy I am. How much I
Yeah,
respect what he can do.
and I could not call you out for that because that's a very valid view or opinion, I guess.
Yep.
So as we talked about Ray Phoenix, I believe we had a few different titles here, and the titles were slightly different than what we've usually seen. We had the Gift of the Gods champion, kind of like their Money in the Bank kind of sort of, but you could also get different pieces that would piece together a medallion at some points. You could also lose it, and someone else could take it away, or what else could you say about the Gift of the Gods, the title?
Right. No, it was a unique concept. Like you said, it borrowed from the Money in the Bank, just in that.
The unique opportunity.
Right. No, yeah. Dario Cueto made a unique opportunity for many superstar, many a fighter in the temple because of this Gift of the Gods title. Like you said, it was actually a piece by piece medallion. There were 7 medallions that you had to capture or put into the belt itself to then most times fight in a 7-man ladder match or some kind of gimmick match to win the belt. So it was always like a multi-man scramble to win the belt in the first place. And then once you were the Gift of the Gods champion, you could cash in. But unlike Money in the Bank, at least at first, for the first few seasons, you had to give notice because Dario was a wise promoter. He needed at least 1 week's notice to promote a big match like that. So, in a way, that's where it differed from Money in the Bank. The Money in the Bank, the gimmick itself is that you could cash in at any point in time and get your title shot. But the Gift of the Gods, it was the secondary title, but it led to that title shot. So yeah, Phoenix I think was the first Gift of the Gods champion at the end of Ultima Lucha. But yeah, the Gift of the Gods was a very unique concept because you could get a lot out of it. You could have a match for one of the 7 medallions. You could have all of them be on the line at once. That kind of thing where there were different stories to tell for one title. Where in all other situations, it is the one title, so you're only telling the one story. But here, you literally could have 7 different matches going on, or 7 different storylines, feuds, all leading to that next level tier, that next title. So, Gift of the Gods was a very unique concept, and I thought they presented it well most times.
Definitely. Another unique concept that they brought, I guess from AAA as well. I think they
Yeah,
utilized the trios title. So they also Dario Cueto would talk about these unique opportunities and talk about these new titles, and they were really good about telling the story and building. And that's something that they really did on this show, or I guess it was a show. It wasn't really a wrestling promotion, like you said.
right.
They didn't really hotshot a lot of things. I felt like they built each week a story. You saw a transformation of different characters, like we'll talk about in a little while. We'll see maybe a hint at possible future characters that they did as well. So they were really good about that. And getting back to the trios title, we saw the unlikely duo we could talk about briefly. I believe they were the first
Yeah.
ever trios champion of Son of
Yeah.
Havoc. What's that?
You called it a duo; it would be a trio. If we're talking about
Oh,
the
I
trio
said
stuff.
duo. No, right, the unlikely duo, the unlikely trio. I'm
There you
sorry,
go.
Havoc, Evie, and Helico. So why don't you talk about those 3 characters and talk about the trios title and how that evolved?
Yeah, for sure. Like you had mentioned, the trio title was a staple of AAA and a lot of Mexican promotions. The lucha style, of course, everything they did had that lucha base to it. So instead of a tag title, we never once saw a tag team title in Lucha Underground.
No.
So the trios title was what it was all about. They initially had kind of a mismatch of fighters. There wasn't ever really like a 3-team stable. So a lot of it was just thrown together, but the thrown together teams had purpose towards the end. And briefly, I
Right.
want to touch on what you were saying about how everything built for a reason. That's something we don't see on current TV. We see a lot of week to week booking that you're scratching your head. Wait. Last week these guys were doing this. Why is it so different now? It was a TV show, and I also wanted to point out, not to break up my own thought, but if anyone remembers Wrestling Society X, it was an MTV series back probably 10, 15 years ago now. But I thought they took a lot of that. Uh, they took a lot from that atmosphere, and they upped it. They upped the ante to be Lucha Underground. Now, the original point I was about to make was that with an Ultima Lucha, that's their big their big event, their big pay per view. Essentially, it wasn't actually a pay per view, but it was their end of the season event. So you could tell that with it being a TV show about wrestling and not a wrestling show per se, that
Mm.
everything did have a meaning. Every storyline was building towards something, and it was all to build towards that Ultima Lucha. Um, but yeah, the same thing with the trios title. The thrown together tag teams all essentially had meaning towards the end. Everybody they either would continue that tag team, or they all break off into little mini feuds. But But yeah, back to the original point. Son of Havoc, who of course was Matt Cross. He's an
And you
indie
mentioned
independent wrestling legend.
the Wrestling Society X with Son of Havoc. He was on that. He was on that show,
Yeah,
was he not?
yeah, he was actually. Good call. I think he teamed with Teddy Hart. I think they were the Filth and the Fury. I think, if my memory serves me right. But a lot of those Wrestling Society X characters actually came over, and Vampiro was one of them. He was still an active wrestler at the time, so it kind of was like the little brother of Wrestling Society X. I think anybody who was
Mm-hmm.
familiar with both would agree with me for sure that there was definitely a lot of ideas pulled. It wasn't necessarily the continuation of it, but it's just a lot of those same ideas were pulled from it. A lot of the gimmicky stuff, maybe not a piranha death match like Lucha or Wrestling Society X had. Some of it was too goofy, but yeah, some of the ideas were pulled, and some of the same talent as well. So definitely, and they were both filmed in that central Los Angeles area, that southern, that SoCal market. So a
Yep.
lot of those guys were available still, and or again. Um, but yeah, Matt Cross, like you'd pointed out, good call on that. Was he's just been an indie legend for probably 15, 20 years now. He's a guy that
Sure.
I'm shocked that never got signed. He's still in great shape, probably now in the best shape he's been in his whole career. Can still
Mm-hmm.
be a high flyer, definitely a veteran of the high flying style, but just so crisp. He's another one that kind of borrows from that parkour style. He kind of meshes well with a Johnny Mundo and that type of guy, but just
Mm-hmm.
a great athlete for sure. Ivelisse Velez, we're starting to see her. I think she either has a spot or she's done some stuff for AEW, so she's starting to
Yep.
get her name
And
out there.
NXT.
Yeah, for sure. She did. She had a quick run there. I think it was in the early days of NXT, not the NXT we know now. If I'm familiar, if
Yeah.
I'm correct. But
Yep.
yeah, she's had a little bit of touch of that top level. But she's a hell of a talent. Probably one of the best females out there that aren't signed, or hopefully she will be soon. But and then of course Angelico was a guy. I think more of the foreign markets. He's what is he? He's South African, I believe.
Yes.
Along with Justin Gabriel, PJ Black, as we know him now in Ring of Honor, and he's another one who would end up building his name in Lucha Underground. But he's a hell of a talent, kind of along the lines of a Jack Evans. They've tag teamed in other promotions as well. But
Yep.
Angelico, a little taller than Jack, but that same style, just a high flying legend, just a virtuoso with some of the things he can do in the ring. So the three of them together, while a mixed match pairing, ended up being a phenomenal pair, just for some of the great stuff they would do. And Angelico's leap from the top of Dario Cueto's office into the ring in
Crazy.
that big ladder match is something to go out of your way to try to find on YouTube, or
Crazy.
hopefully if you could find the Lucha Underground series at some point to watch. And hopefully we're doing a good enough job hyping it up that you want to go out of your way and find some of this stuff. That
Sure.
spot itself, just it's a highlight reel type maneuver. So, but yeah, just to cap off those three together, just a phenomenal pairing. All three of them together, individually, they all bring something to the table, and then you put them together, and it's just some really good stuff.
Definitely. And I wanted to point out too, Son of Havoc, Matt Cross. We also saw in NWA Power towards the end of their
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
recent tapings before the COVID stuff. We saw Evie and AEW. We also saw, was it Angelico or was it just Jack Evans? I think they both were on AEW for a very short period early on. They were featured as a tag team.
yeah. The hybrid
Not
too,
not for
the tag team thing. They've been
yeah,
pretty much.
they weren't there very long. So kind of the
I think
culmination of
they're
the
on
whole.
the show, but I think they're on Dark. I think they don't use them to their potential either, which I
No,
don't know why. A lot of these guys haven't been used to their
right,
potential, but yeah, no,
definitely.
they've been sporadically used. I don't know if it was more because of COVID that maybe he wasn't allowed in, due to travel reasons or whatever. I know that was
I
the
felt
case.
like it was before that they stopped using them.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're probably right. Um, not too
So
sure.
like I was mentioning, I know we've seen these guys in other promotions, and we're talking about their back histories, but there was also a lot of guys who we hadn't seen before, like you mentioned, like Phoenix or Angelico, who I wasn't originally, I'll admit, not a huge fan of, and then I seen some of those, the death-defying moves that he pulled out and his athleticism, and he blew my mind. And then a guy that you weren't familiar with, or neither one of us were familiar with, was King Cuerno, who you really weren't a fan of early
Right.
on, and then now, of course, he's Santos Escobar or something like that, or Escobar Santos in NXT, El Fantasmo and TNA before that. But probably the culmination of the end, or at least the finale, the grand finale, or whatever you want to call it, of season 1 was Pentagon, who had been making his sacrifices to his master. He kept talking about his master. He was snapping guys' arms in the ring and making these sacrifices for his master. He was going at he was out of control. He was attacking some of the female wrestlers as well. Which an interesting point about Lucha Underground was the female wrestlers and the male wrestlers were on par. It wasn't uncommon for them to be in the ring together because they were that awesome. One of them being a Sexy Star. We mentioned Ivelisse. So Sexy Star had been attacked by Pentagon. Also, the lovely Melissa Santos was also attacked by Pentagon Jr. and of course, but you already said Katrina was your wife, so she's already taken though. We didn't even talk about Mr. Brian Cage yet. Well, besides your shirt. So, but anyway. Back to what we were saying. I knew this was going to happen because we're so into this promotion or this TV show at the time.
Yeah.
So Pentagon, he's out of control. Finally, we mentioned Vampiro, and his time away from the ring now had been quite a while, and this violence, and you see the transformation, and you hear Matt Stryker saying, "Listen, this isn't your place. Don't get involved. You know, you got all kinds of issues. You know, you've come a long way with your drug addiction, and really getting into kind of his own personal background and all that kind of stuff." So finally, he gets involved, and basically, he's going to have a big match with Vampiro, of course, or with Pentagon. And that's kind of the blow off of season 1. So why don't you take us along that journey of Pentagon versus Vampiro at Ultima Lucha, which is their big final pay-per-view kind of.
Right. The culmination essentially of the entire season. They ended up having the Cierro Miedo match, which was just an anything goes, including fire. We'd set, they set the bar very high for a gimmick match. But we'd see the flaming tables, we'd see the light tubes, a lot of the deathmatch stuff. And it ended up being a hell of a match for a guy who hadn't been active in quite a while. Vampiro really pulled out all the stops, showed us what he was made of. Of course, we know Pentagon can go. He's at the top of his performance right now, the top of his game. But it was just a very interesting storyline. Like you said, they were building to who is the master. Was this going to be a new character? Was it going to be an old legend, or like a returning veteran? One of those things. Ended up being Vampiro himself. So after these guys bloody and batter each other for probably the 20-minute match, whatever it was, Vampiro tells him, "My son, you are ready." The crowd goes, "What?" They go nuts. It was finally they embraced the ring, and it was just it was something. And unlike a lot of WWE storylines where halfway through how this is gonna go, oh, this guy's gonna turn on this guy, he's gonna come back, whatever.
Nobody saw this one.
Yeah, this was really out of nowhere. You saw some of the crowd reaction shots, and I believe they were genuine. They were very genuine. So it was a hell of a story, hell of just the writing, the arc of this angle was just phenomenal stuff. This was one of the main 3 matches of Lucha Underground's Ultima Lucha. So this was definitely a big part of what that whole season was building towards, was getting Pentagon over as the next Vampiro. The protege of such a demented character in Vampiro. This was going to be Pentagon now. He was ready to take over and be the next Psycho, essentially. So just brilliant stuff. They put it together perfectly.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention how they kind of put this show together. There he is.
Yeah,
yes,
the man.
Of course. And all right, if you want to take a look back at more of your mask collection, and I only really have the one here, and then my Rey Mysterio, who we talk about if we ever get to season 2 review of Lucha Underground. I just wanted to mention too, and I'm not sure how much involvement this guy might have had, but I heard it was quite a bit, especially on the production side. We see, I'm not sure if Chavo Guerrero Jr. I'm not sure if he was in season 1, maybe season 2. I'm not sure. But either way, Chavo Classic.
The character he would come in later on, but yeah, they had used both Guerreros as like producer roles. I too am not 100% positive on who was putting together season one, but whoever it was just they were telling some great stories, and there had to have been at least one or two great wrestling minds. These weren't just TV
Yes.
producers, Hollywood, deciding
Right.
that this would have been a good angle. There was definitely
And that
some good wrestling writers involved, some great minds for the business.
and that's what I was trying, and that's exactly what I was trying to say. Is there was somebody here that knew a little bit more about how to put together a good wrestling product, and then maybe someone else with a good TV show background, whatever. I'm sorry, Chris DeJoseph. I can't say his name.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Oh,
so
he was a WWE guy for years. Actually, you may remember him on TV as a character as Big Dick Johnson, who would come out as the oiled up dancing fat guy. But no, Chris actually was he ended up actually hooking me up for my season 4 vacation. Between him and Marty the Moth Martinez, I got a hold of him to find out when the taping dates were going to happen. I booked a flight before I even knew if I was going to have tickets or not. I showed Chris on Instagram pictures of my lucha living room, which at the time I was living somewhere else, but it was all this same stuff. They saw how big a fan I was of this product, and they ended up hooking me up. I had front row seats. I was around the ring pretty much the entire season 4. So big thanks to you, Chris, if you're ever going to check out the podcast. Thanks also to Marty Martinez. But for a Lucha Underground fan to then come into the temple, it was a new temple, but it was still the temple, and experience that. Even though it was just season 4, seasons 1, 2, and 3 were probably a little bit better. I say that now, looking back, with rose-colored glasses. Of course, everything was better in the beginning, but season 4 was still a hell of a lot of fun. So that was just a quick side note. I wanted to thank all those guys for letting me be a part of that. But yeah, Chris DeJoseph, who was also back with WWE now. He was another one like Johnny Morrison. We were lucky to have him on his off time because he had a great vision for this product. So hell yeah.
absolutely. And at the time as we were watching this, and kind of we were a little bit behind the ball. Of course, this came out. Was it 2015, 2014?
Late 2014, October of 14, it debuted
Yeah.
on the El
So
Rey Network.
we were a little bit behind as far as when it came out, but when we did check it out finally, we were both really hooked. I don't
Yeah,
think we've been into any kind of wrestling related product like this in a very long time.
right.
Highly recommend checking out season 1,
Yeah,
especially Ultima Lucha. A couple notable matches from then would definitely be already talked about: Pentagon and Vampiro, Mil Muertes and Phoenix's casket match, the trios match. Cage versus the Mac. That was an awesome one. That was almost like a anything goes type match. It was a fun match.
yeah,
Brian Cage was also a heavily pushed character early on,
yeah. Just about to
and then I
say
remember
everything you
him,
got.
of course,
Yeah,
ripping the title belt apart. I mean, what a powerhouse and what an awesome look he had. We knew some of these guys were destined for bigger things. Of course, now he's on AEW every week, but just an amazing roster that was put together, well booked, good minds behind the scenes that were putting this stuff together, and it all came. And I just felt like the audience was so small that, man, if you weren't a part of this, or you can always go back and watch it. Everything's on YouTube or wherever, and
right.
I'm sure there's a way to purchase the DVDs or whatever, or purchase the seasons from El Rey Network or something like that. But if you get a chance, oh man,
Yeah.
such a great product, and it's so much so that you basically was a kind of part of you moving to California.
Yeah, honestly, it was a big part. Excuse me there. Just a notification pop up that I thought I had muted, but just wanted to get that swiped out of the way. Anyway, but no, you're right. Just getting out to LA was that was essentially I vacationed out there because of the season 4 opportunity, the unique opportunity, thanks to Dario Cueto. Um, and then after that vacation, it changed my life. Essentially, changed my mindset to say, you know what, I want to live out there. I want to live out there. So I spent 18 months out there. I'm back in New York now. We contemplated going back and forth on changing the name, but I'm still west of you and you're still east of me, so we're keeping the name
It's
East
true.
West Connect. But no, but anyway, so it did. Really, Lucha Underground was why I ended up moving, why my mindset and I live the life that I do right now. Which it sounds goofy that a pro wrestling TV show could have such a huge impact on a guy, but I
There
got
it is.
there it is. It's tattooed on me for life, and that's the impact it really had on me. Even just as a TV show, it was a hell of a enjoyable ride. for seasons 1 through 4. We wish there would be more. Eventually, we'll get into how we would book season 5 and onward, perhaps. But real quick,
fun.
I do just want to step back real quick and bring up Brian Cage again, real quick. You brought him up. We didn't spend a lot of time on him, but to me and to a lot of people, this was his coming out party. He had been working the California Cal scene for a while, and he'd been working on his body, and really he just became a monster. Imagine, I mean, at this point everybody's familiar with him because of the Lucha Underground stuff, and now especially because of AEW and his Impact run. He had an Impact X Division champ, world champ, the whole deal. But imagine this guy. He comes out and he looks like Scott Steiner, just a machine, an absolute monster. And imagine he moves like Rey Mysterio in WCW. What? How? How does that happen? But that's Brian Cage. He was just a phenomenal athlete. He blows my mind every time I see the guy work. He's crisp, he's solid, he's a powerhouse, but he can move, he can work. He top guy in my opinion. So I was lucky enough to kind of get a relationship with him going through just internet and Instagram, and just being a fan and asking him a lot of workout tips. And at the time, he wasn't a huge superstar yet, so he was actually kind of a little more responsive.
Some time for you.
Yeah, and then once I made it out there, we continued that a little bit, and I ended up getting in a back day workout with him at one of his gyms, and just a hell of a dude. So thank you to Brian as well. But even if that weren't to have happened, I still would have been a huge fan of the guy. So I just wanted to throw in that quick little side note on the machine, Brian Cage. Hell of an athlete, hell of a talent, and hell of a guy. So and he's married to Melissa Santos, so I don't know how you get much better than that. So
yes, definitely. Yeah, huge fan of Brian. I mean, there were so many guys. Like I honestly, like, I know you said Phoenix was one of your top guys. Brian, Mortes, Puma. Pentagon. I can't like put my finger on like who was my favorite. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, there were so many good. Like usually with a promotion, it's like, you got your favorites. You got your Steve Austin or The Rock, or I guess you could like both of them. But like, you got your favorite, or at least top 2 or 3 guys. There was like so much good talent. Like, you had to appreciate all of it, and so many of them were brand new to us, or at least seen very little of, that it was fresh faces to see that were actually getting some national TV
exposure. Yeah, for sure.
Exposure, yes.
You're right. Yeah, I was reading your mind on that one. But no, you're right, and that's a big part of it too. Is that it wasn't just about a Johnny Mundo or a Cage or whoever. It was that ensemble of Lucha Underground. We were a fan of Lucha Underground, the product, because there was so much talent, top to bottom. Opening match to the main event. You were going to see hell of a match, hell of a talent, hell of a storyline, and even the writers are involved in that as well. So it wasn't even just the talent in the ring; it was just that whole ensemble together, put together some really special stuff. I'm sure we could keep going, but I think just putting it out there like that, just that ensemble cast, that Lucha Underground TV show itself, is what we were such a huge fan of. I feel like for me, that's a good way to start wrapping it up. But unless you have any further points, I think this was a good introduction to why we are such huge Lucha Underground fans. Why we've become it's almost become the standard bearer of what we want wrestling to be at this point. And probably it's why we're frustrated with AEW and WWE's booking and just things like that, is because we see what is available and what's possible to do with these guys, because so many of them are there now. If they're not in NXT, a lot of them are in AEW or not signed altogether. And for whatever reason, we know what's out there. We know what's possible to be as wrestling. We want this to be our wrestling again. And unfortunately, it's not. WWE has their vision. AEW is finding their vision. And unfortunately, none of it is Lucha Underground. We would take that back in a heartbeat. I'm sure I could speak for you on that one. But yeah, that's where I'll wrap it up, I guess, for me on my introduction to Lucha Underground. I thank you for setting me up on that. Just letting me go off for a little while there. But yeah, Lucha Underground, A+ show. Please go out of your way to check out. There was a lot. The seasons were actually pretty long. They were 20, 30 episodes per season in the beginning, the first few seasons. So even look up a best of, look up some of those types of videos, and you're gonna find some stuff you enjoy. I promise you that.
Definitely, absolutely. So I think for this week's episode, that definitely puts the finishing wraps on it. Stay tuned for next week's content. Still kind of working out some of the kinks. We appreciate you guys that have stuck with us through the format change. Once again, we could be revisiting the Attitude Era. We could be doing some watch-along stuff. We've got a request for some possible fantasy booking stuff. So, a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts, but we appreciate your participation. And we have more episodes coming. For Sig, I am